When I was 19, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table one day and I heard a voice say, "You're going to die, but you're going to be okay." I ended up in the hospital. I had a fever of 104, 105. I was laying in my bed when the nurses came in, and as they checked my vitals, I felt my body lifting off the bed, and I was about height with their shoulders. And no one seemed concerned that I was floating off the bed. And after they left, I felt myself float back down. Over the next 3 weeks, I was able to leave my body multiple times as I was at my most critical. My name is Vandermeyden, and when I was 20, I had a near-death experience, and it changed my life completely. It made me a different person. It took away my fear of death, and this is my story. When I was 19, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and I was not doing well with medications. I wasn't going to remission, and when I was 20, I'd become sicker, and I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table one day, and I heard a voice say, "You're going to die, but you're going to be okay." And I was by myself, and I looked around the room for this male voice, and I didn't see anybody. But I felt like I could trust this voice, as weird as that sounds, and I started preparing for my death. I was pretty sick at this point with the colitis, but I didn't feel like that was what was going to take me because I was in denial that I really was as sick as I was. So I assumed I would die in a car accident. So I didn't tell my family about this because it was kind of weird to have this voice tell you you're going to die and feel like you need to prepare for that. But as the months went on, I became sicker and sicker. And in December of 1999, I ended up in the hospital. I had a fever of 104, 105 per month. I was scared, again, in severe denial. But they put me into surgery. They removed my large intestine and gave me an ileostomy, so I had a colostomy bag. And as they wheeled me out of surgery, I thought, I didn't die. That's great. I guess I'm okay. And that voice didn't know what he was talking about. On New Year's Eve of that year, a couple of days after the surgery, I was laying in my bed when the nurses came in to check on me. There were 2 nurses. My family was in the room watching the ball drop in the other country. And as they checked my vitals, they were on each side of the bed, and I felt what felt like my body lifting off the bed, and I was about height with their shoulders. And no one seemed concerned that I was floating off the bed, but it scared me. And after they left, I felt myself float back down. And I didn't say anything to anybody because they didn't seem alarmed, but I was pretty confused. About a week later, well, a couple days later after that, my small intestine came out of my stomach into my colostomy bag, and I was rushed back in for surgery to replace it. And then a week later, it happened again. And this is when I went critical. My body was so broken from all the surgeries I had. I was 94 pounds. I was just not well. And when I was taken out of surgery, my lungs developed ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and I developed sepsis throughout my body. And the breathing became harder and harder. I was panicking because I knew that I was not well, and I couldn't make myself breathe. And they had everyone leave the room, and I had about 8 nurses. I was in the shock trauma unit. And as they wheeled me down to another room at a fast rate of speed, they were trying to resuscitate me. Suddenly, I found myself watching a scene in front of me. I was sitting on kind of like stadium seating, and to my right, there were nurses in a nurses station, and they didn't notice that I was there, and I didn't seem concerned that I wasn't being noticed. And when I looked to my left, there was a young girl on a hospital bed, and she had about 8 nurses around her, and they were working at a fast rate, trying to sedate her. They were trying to resuscitate her and ventilate, and I felt really bad for her. She seemed really young, and she seemed really sick, and the nurses were scared. You could tell they were scared. And as I watched for a few minutes, I suddenly realized that I could understand what the nurses were thinking, and I could understand what the girl was thinking. They were all very, very worried. I watched for a few more minutes, and I realized that that girl was me. I was indulged in this brilliant love and peace that I'd never experienced before, and I wanted to stay there forever. The next thing I knew, I woke up, and I was back in my body. The room was dark, and I was tied to my bed, and I was ventilated, and I couldn't talk. And I found out later that I had been trying to pull out my my tubes. Over the next 3 weeks, I was able to leave my body multiple times as I was at my most critical. And it was amazing to be enveloped in that love every single time I would leave. The first experience after that, I was laying in bed. I was in shock trauma still, and it was dark outside. It was late at night. I was by myself. And suddenly I felt my soul just leave my body, and it was traveling in this dark tunnel at such an excessive speed. And it was terrifying. There was a man standing very close to me, about that close, and he was wearing a top hat and a suit. I felt very calm next to him. He never said anything, but he had these dark eyes that were just so loving. They were full of love, and the amount of speed that we were gaining was terrifying to me. And every time I would start to panic, I'd pop back in my body. And this happened multiple times over 3 days. And for 25 years, I didn't know who that man was. And then late last year, and so I looked up our family genealogy, and there was a picture of him. It was my great-great-grandfather. So seeing him in that tunnel was profoundly comforting to me, to know that our relatives that pass on are still involved in our life, even though they're not here with us. So what started as a very scary experience going through a tunnel, I now have comfort knowing he was there to guide me back. And I never made it to the light at the end of the tunnel because it wasn't my time to go. But he was always there to comfort me. And so I know that when I do go back, when I take the last breath here, that he will be there with me. Back in my hospital bed after that, I had a fever that had gotten to 107.5. I was pretty septic at this point. I was on multiple antibiotics, and I was not healing. And the nurses packed me in ice. They literally put ice on my bed. They had fans going, trying to cool me down as fast as possible. And it was miserable. I was shaking so severely. I was so cold, and they couldn't do anything about it to help me. And suddenly, pop, I was out of my body. And I found myself in front of this building, this very ancient sandstone, and it had 2 pillars in the front of it. And the door was about 10 feet tall. It was just a massive, tall building. And I could feel this soul behind me to my right shoulder. He was right behind me, and he felt very comforting. And I thought to myself, I want to be in that building. There's just something about that building. I want to see what's happening. And as I thought this thought, I was suddenly in the front door of the buildings, and I thought, this is amazing. I just went through a wall. It was pretty cool for me. I stood there for a few minutes. I watched what was happening around me. There were people that were reading books. There were chairs everywhere, people, and they had walls with bookcases. And as I stood there, I suddenly popped into a room that had thousands and thousands of books. And this man that had been with me in the beginning was with me. And he let me read all these books, and there were scrolls. He opened the scrolls, and I could understand the ancient symbols. And there was so much knowledge in this room. There was no ceiling. The room was round, and the books went on forever. And I thought I could stay here all day and read these books. But I was told whatever I read in there, I would forget. And I'm not sure how long I was in that room, but once I finished with my reading, I found myself in the entrance of the building again. And off to the right, there was a podium, like you would have at a speaking engagement. And I felt very drawn to this podium. I started to glide over to the podium. And when I got to the podium, it started to move to the left, and I realized there were stairs underneath, and I walked down the stairs. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I noticed that it was full of water. There were pools of water, waterfalls. There was a mother with her 2 children that were in the waterfall, just splashing water. There were people everywhere in the water, and they were just so happy. And I felt like this water, from what I was told, was a very pure water that was very healing, and that you had to be of a certain frequency or energy level to be able to go into that water. And I found a pool in front of me, and I knew I needed to be in that water. I knew it would heal me. And the first thing I noticed is that I could splash the water around, that it wasn't making my body or my soul wet. My hair wasn't getting wet. And my guide sat behind me and let me stay there as long as I needed to. But over the next few days, I was able to go back and forth to this water. Every time I would leave my body, the amount of love that I was surrounded and cocooned in was just like something I'd never experienced before. It was something that we don't have on this earth. We can't explain in words the feeling of being in that presence of pure loving energy. So as my fever raged, I stayed in the shock trauma unit. And at one point I left my body and I found myself in this room. There was a older man and woman that were there. And I went over to talk to them and I said, who are you? And they said that they were angels that ministered to the patients in the shock trauma unit and that they would comfort them and help heal them if they were meant to stay here. And if they were meant to pass on, that they would see the face of God in a door. It was a door that had a glass top to it, with the top half was glass. If they saw the face of God, they knew that patient was going to pass on, and they would help comfort the patient and help bring him back to the other side. And they would place their hands on the shoulders of the parents and the family and comfort them. And there was one patient in particular that really stood out to me. He was a younger kid. He had been in a car accident. He's probably in his teens. And his mother and brother and father were in the room with him. And at that point, I saw the face of God. His eyes were the most stunning, vibrant color blue that I'd ever seen. It was like you could see the universe through them. He had white, almost pearlish colored hair and a beard and a mustache, very clean shaven. And I just felt this immense love when I saw him. And I knew immediately who it was. And I remembered him from before I came to this earth. And I just felt such love from him. There was no judgment. I could tell that he loves every one of us and he knows every one of us. But I just felt like I could stay there forever and have this beautiful reunion. But back in the room of this young man, when it was time for the angels to take him back to heaven, they put their hands on the shoulders of the parents and the brother, and I could see this light go from the angels to the family, and it was their love that they were getting them, comforting them because they were losing their child. And that was really profound to me because there were times in the hospital I felt very alone. I couldn't talk. I was on a ventilator. I couldn't tell anyone if my lips were dry or if I was hungry. I had a feeding tube, but I felt very, very alone even though I was surrounded by family. And so to know that there were extra things going on around us that we couldn't see was just very, very comforting. It gave me peace that I was going to be okay and I was loved. At one point, my aunt, who had passed away previously, appeared in my room and she said, "Do you want to go see your uncle at her house that she'd lived in before she passed?" And I said, "Yes." And I found myself in the front living room, and my Uncle Harry was still alive. The house looked exactly the same as it had when she lived there, and she told me that he was going to fall in the hallway and he had passed away from his injuries. And as I looked down the hallway, I saw the scene happen, and he couldn't get up, and I could feel his feelings. He was scared that there was no one there to help, and he was in his 80s at this point. And it was really upsetting to me to see him fall and not have anyone to help him. And once I returned to my hospital room, I was trying to tell my family, "You need to go check on him." And they couldn't understand what I was trying to say. I was on the ventilator still. After about 3 days, I finally was able to write the name Harry down on the paper, and they sent my grandpa over to check on him, and he came to the hospital and said, "He's okay." I had been very agitated. And when he told me he was okay, I was happy to hear that, but I was also quite confused because I had seen this scene that was so purely him falling and dying. And 15 years later, I got a call from my mom that he had actually passed away in the hallway the exact same way I'd seen it happen. But it was very validating to myself and my family that these things I was seeing were happening. At one point, I left my body and I found myself in my grandparents' backyard. My grandma had passed away, and she actually lived across the street from this aunt and uncle, and my grandfather still owned the house. And as I sat in the backyard, it was very dark outside. I could see millions of stars in the sky, and it was almost like we were in this snow globe. And suddenly I looked to the back of the yard, and there are orbs floating from right to left. And most of the orbs are full of this like static energy. 3 of the orbs had faces in them. One was this aunt that I'd seen. One was my grandmother, who was around me all the time during my NDEs. She'd passed about a year before. And then the other face was my great-grandfather, who was 94 when he passed away. And the thing that was so profound to me was that they all looked healthy, and they looked in their 30s, but I knew it was them, but they just looked so vibrantly happy. And as they got to the left side of the yard, they disappeared, and then I popped back in my body. And that seemed to be the way it happened. I would pop out for small amounts of time, and then I would pop back in. And it became kind of a game that I was able to leave if the pain became too intense. One day, my nurse sat me on the bed. I had so many medical devices and tubes and machines around me. It took about 10 minutes to get me up and moving. He sat me on the bed and he had his hands on my shoulders, and suddenly the pain became too intense and I was out of my body. Just boom, I was out. And I found myself in a hallway behind where my hospital room was. There were hundreds of windows that were oval, and I was watching them. My mom was in the room as well, and my nurse was shaking his hand, snapping it, going, Heather, Heather, come back, come back. And as he's begging me to come back, I can feel the fear radiating off of him, and I can feel my mom's fear as well. And she didn't want to lose me, but at the same time, she was scared that I was going to be like this forever, and she hated seeing me suffer. And I heard my guide say, you need to go back. And so I went back into my body, and as I did, the nurse said, oh, we lost you there for a minute. And I shook my head, yeah. But watching my body from the sidelines, I wasn't moving. I wasn't making any breathing noises. My chest wasn't moving up and down. It was like watching a dead person. There was no energy being expelled. And to me, that means our soul is really our lifeline. It's the best part of us. My husband at the time, his grandmother would come to visit quite a bit. And one day she was rubbing a small part of my arm that wasn't covered in IDs. And I left my body, and I found myself in this horse stable. There were 4 horses in there, and 2 were on each side, and then there was an opening in the middle for them to walk. And I could see her telling me from the side to fight, and I could see the horses, and I picked up a rope that was on the ground, and I started pulling on it like this and screaming at the top of my lungs. I was so angry. I didn't have any fight left in me. And I did that for a few minutes as I'm watching her telling me I had to make it. And then I started to pet the horses, and this comfort came over me, and this peace that it was going to be okay, and I needed to fight. I needed to do better. And it gave me that little push I needed to not feel sorry for myself, and to know that whatever happened, it was meant to be, and I would be okay. But at this point, I was still profoundly sick, and I was still having raging fevers. I popped out of my body, and I found myself over this green, grassy area, tons of oak trees. The sky was this vibrant color blue. Everything on the other side is just full of life and love. Like, everything has life to it. The trees, the grass, the flowers, everything is light. And I had my guide with me as always, and I noticed 2 white tents below me. And as we kind of floated down, I realized that it was a station set up for the doctors. They had huge medical books, they had petri dishes, microscopes, and they had their white coats on. There was quite a few of them, and they were working pretty fast, and I knew that they were needing to find some information as fast as possible. And as I watched them, my guide said to me, they don't know how to help you. It's through faith and prayer alone you will survive. When we say these prayers, it's like balls of light. They're going up, shooting up, and it's almost like the angels and the guides were grabbing these requests from us and trying to help us. But I knew that the nurses and doctors were trying to help me, but I knew it wasn't up to them, and I just had to do my best to survive. As I started to finally start to heal a little bit, these 2 children started showing up to the foot of the bed, and I didn't know who they were. I didn't have any children at the time. I was married, but we didn't have any kids. And the boy had really curly blonde hair and hazel-ish green eyes, and the little girl had really straight blonde hair and same color of eyes. They never spoke to me, but I just assumed that they were there as kind of angelic souls watching over me, and I felt very comforted by them. As I continued to not heal, I left my body, and I found myself at the entrance to heaven, and I knew that it was the entrance. There were no golden gates, but there were thousands and thousands of souls on each side of the entrance, and they were dressed in similar beige type robes, and they were different heights, and they were lit in such this intense gorgeous light that I couldn't see their faces. But I knew that they were my relatives and friends from many, many generations. Some that I had been with before I'd come to this earth, some on this earth, and some that I would meet after. And they were welcoming me back. And I knew if I got past that entrance, that I wouldn't have to return to my body. And it became this amazing journey that I needed to complete. Like, it was the biggest race of my life, and I knew I needed to get to the other side as fast as possible. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to tell my guide that I'm going to see my grandma in her garden, and then I'll stay. Once I get past that point, I know I don't have to come back. On the other side, we speak telepathically. There's no movement of our now. We understand each other's thoughts. And as I'm telling him what I'm going to do, he knows what I'm thinking. And I laugh about it now, but at the time I was just so intent on getting to the other side. And as soon as I thought that and told him, he said, "You'd have to go back. It's not your time." And then I just slammed back into my body. I was so upset that I had blown the one chance I had of staying there. And it set me into this pretty severe depression. But I did actually start healing after that. And after about 3 weeks, I quit having near-death experiences. I quit leaving my body, and I was transferred to a transitional care unit to heal. I was in rehab 4 times a day. And finally, in February, the end of February, they allowed me to go home with my parents to heal. And I started to heal pretty well after that. And in March of 2002, I decided to do one more surgery at that time. The month before we decided to do that, we had taken foster care classes. I've been watching TV one day, and I heard the voice of my guide say, "Your body can't carry a healthy pregnancy, and if you want to be a mother, you're going to have to adopt." And so my husband and I took the foster care classes, and then I decided to have the surgery next month while they were getting the home study ready. I went home and I developed sepsis again. And I was laying in my bed. My mom was sitting next to me in the bed, and I suddenly felt my soul start to leave my body. And I said to my mom, I'm leaving my body now. And I just thought, okay, I'm done here. I've done whatever I need to do, and I can go home now. Because I considered being out of my body, being in that place, home. That was my true place. And I floated about 5 feet off the bed, and I felt the room surrounded with angels, just thousands and thousands of angels. And then I had this very strong knowledge this is the last time I would leave my body. And it was just a little gift, a little reprieve. And as soon as I heard that voice, I started to float back down into my body. And I knew that was the last time that my health would recover after that. I called the doctor after, and I said, I don't need to come in. All the infection's gone. I could feel the fevers leave my body. It was like it started at the top of my head and just left my body completely. And after that, I healed at an incredibly fast rate. And the month after that, about a month and a half after, 6 weeks, we got our first foster child. And she was just this amazing little squeezable amount of joy. I love that baby so much. And she stayed with us for 6 months and then went to family. We had a baby after that, a 2-week-old for a bit. And then we got a call for a third child. And before I'd gotten the call for this child, I'd been shopping with the newborn and getting in some baby clothes. And I heard that voice of my guide say, you're going to get a call for 2 children, a 6-week-old baby girl and a 22-month-old baby boy. And you're going to get the boy. The little girl is going to go to the family that has her 2-year-old sister, and the little boy is going to stay with you. So I just knew that this child was supposed to be in our life for however long it was going to be. And when I picked him up from the shelter where he was, it was winter time, and he had this blue fleece hat on and a blue coat and tiny little thing. He's like 19 pounds. And I took him home with me. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn with me besides this child. I took him home and I took his hat off, and this blonde hair just went, and it was the child that was in the hospital. And I called my parents, my husband was at work, and I said, oh my gosh, this is the kid that was in the hospital. And I still didn't know what it meant if we were going to adopt him, because it wasn't looking like that at that point. It was just a foster care placement. And if for some reason his family was not able to have him back, then we would be the adoptive home. So for the next 18 months, he was our foster child. And then we actually did end up adopting him. And he's 25 now. And he still has that gorgeous curly hair. It's been such an amazing experience to know that that child that was with me before he was born. And so as the years went on, a couple years, I thought, I wonder if that little girl is going to come. And we fostered quite a few children that had gone back to family or had been adopted. And he was the only one that we'd adopted. And then one day I woke up. It was summertime. And I just knew. I knew she was coming that day. And so I got all the baby girl stuff ready and waited. And I'd had enough experience with my guide to know that what I was hearing was going to happen. And about 4:30 that night, I got a call from our caseworker saying, we have a little girl. She's 11 weeks old and she's a placement. As her hair started to grow in and she got healthier, I realized this was the little girl in the hospital. And it amazed me. We had her a couple of months when her birth mother asked me if we would adopt her. She told me that she had an experience when she was pregnant and that she had been told that she would not raise her, but she would choose the person that did raise her, and that I was supposed to be her mom. My daughter's 21 now, and I look back on the years with my kids and think this is amazing that they were able to come to me before they were born to let me know that they were going to be part of my life. And I consider it a very large gift that I was able to raise them, and I had a hand in watching them grow. It's been an amazing experience. This helped change my fear of death. I'm not afraid to die anymore. And I was really scared before. But I don't have that fear anymore. To me, it's like we open one door and we walk into another. And we're still us. We're just in a different frequency, different energy. And there's so much love waiting for us. We need to provide acts of service. We need to love others. We all came from the same place. We're all loved. And we are all one. And I am a different person because of this experience. And it's changed everything in my life. And as much as I love my life, I wonder when I'm going to go back to be back in that immersive love again.